Welcome to another episode of GeekOutdoors.com. So in today's video, I'm going to be doing something a little bit different because there's just so many things going on around the world, specifically with this whole coronavirus thing. And so today, I just want to have some fun. And so what I've done here is I've just basically put in some video games that I've enjoyed, and it's basically going back to my childhood whenever I used to love going to the video game arcade. And so I'm going to be taking you with me to this arcade. And so I don't really have anything scripted. I just want to play some video games and talk about it. And before I get into this, just for all the geeks out there all around the world, please take care of yourselves. And, if you are in a situation where, things are not great, that hopefully things will get better real soon. And so let's go ahead and talk about this very first video game that I have. This is Daytona USA. Whenever I saw this game in the arcades, I was just like, wow, I've never seen a racing game this awesome. Now, Daytona was developed by Sega and specifically Yu Suzuki's team. I think it was the AM2 team, and they were just phenomenal at producing some of the best arcade games ever. And Daytona USA, at least for me, it's one of the biggest revolutions when it comes to racing games. And before that, I would say Yu Suzuki's Outrun was also a revolutionary game. And the reason why Daytona was so awesome was because, first and foremost, look at these graphics. They're absolutely stunning. Everything is so fast, quick, and smooth. And at the same time, it just has that Sega arcade feel. And it's really hard to explain that until you've played Daytona. Now, this version that I'm showing you right here, this is the Dreamcast version. And so this isn't the original Daytona USA, but it's still pretty great nonetheless. And at that time, whenever Daytona USA came out, it was really hard for any console to actually reproduce what was done in the arcade. And it wasn't until years later that we were able to get this version. And I can't say enough about how awesome it was to play Daytona for the first time, especially if you were in an arcade that had like link cabinets. And so you would have all these cabinets with these like race car style cockpits. And then when you are racing against so many different people, this is intense. The speed, the crashes, the color, the excitement. And at the same time, whenever you're playing this as a kid, it was pretty expensive to play Daytona USA. I think it's like $1 or maybe like $1.50 to play each game. But the whole experience was so thrilling. And even to this day, I still love playing Daytona USA. I'm not great at it, but it's just fun. I've never been a huge NASCAR fan, but ever since I played Daytona USA, I've actually enjoyed watching it more, and I kind of understand it a little bit more. But overall, this is one of those games that just takes you to another level in terms of a great driving experience, and at the same time, it's one that can be enjoyed, together. And Daytona USA is just one of those classic games that, to me, will never get old. It's just a game that I could play over and over and still be wowed by it. And so that's Daytona USA, the first arcade game on my list. So let's go ahead and go to another arcade game and drop in some quarters. So the next game that we're playing is Street Fighter, but it's not the Street Fighter that we all know and love, but instead it is based upon the Street Fighter movie starring Jean-Claude Van Damme. Now, whenever I first saw this in the arcade, I was really confused because at first I was like, okay, is that another Mortal Kombat clone? But then when I saw the characters that were there, I'm like, wait, that's Street Fighter. And now I was really confused. But then when I realized what was going on, I was like, okay, let me try this out. It's Mortal Kombat with Street Fighter characters. And when I first played it, I absolutely hated it because the original Street Fighter, Street Fighter 2, and all the other editions after that, it was traditional, hand-drawn animation, and it's just an incredible thing to look at. And so whenever I was playing this, I was still thinking of the normal Street Fighter, and I really didn't like it at all. But as I played it more and more, I realized that Capcom did bring in a lot of what we like about Street Fighter, specifically the play mechanics, all the move, our favorite characters, and then some additional characters from the movie as well. And I think with that, I think Capcom was able to do a pretty good job considering the fact that you are having digitized characters where their look and animation can never compare to the, traditional hand-drawn art that we get in our Street Fighter games. And for it being a digitized game, it's definitely better than most Mortal Kombat clones. But honestly, if you compared it directly to Mortal Kombat, it just can't compare. They're just really different games, and it doesn't really lend itself well as a Street Fighter game to be digitized in this way. But I guess the game did well enough to where they were able to make a kind of like championship edition of Street Fighter the movie. And they were also able to add a lot of characters that we know and love, like here Akuma. And there were like two characters from the movie. There was a soldier, and there was another one called Sawada, and they were included in this game. And overall, I think if you did enjoy the movie, for the few people who really did love that movie, then obviously you're gonna really like this game. But for people who really love traditional Street Fighter games, I don't think it's gonna be on top of their list, although it's not as bad as it could have been. And so that's Street Fighter, the movie arcade game. If you haven't played it, maybe check it out. You might actually like it, or maybe you might actually wish you never played it. So let's move on to the next game. So if you owned a Nintendo Entertainment System back in the day, then you're probably very familiar with this popular ninja game series called Ninja Gaiden. And for most people, this was their first exposure to it. However, there was an original Ninja Gaiden arcade game, which is what we have here. And so the arcade version is nothing like the home version. This is a straight beat 'em up, whereas the home version is an epic action game. And so whenever I got the chance to play the arcade game, I was like, wait, is this Ninja Gaiden? Because I was so used to playing the Nintendo version. And after playing this for about 10 to 20 minutes, I was already bored. Because the arcade version, even though it has really awesome graphics, it's very generic. And it was a hard game, not because it was like challenging per se, like you would have in the Nintendo Entertainment version, but it was challenging because the controls weren't great. The hit detection was bad, and a lot of times I would end up jumping in places that I didn't want to. And as you're going throughout this game, a lot of the villains, they're the same villains over and over. They just color swap them. And the overall variety of the levels and stuff, it was just not that great at all. And at least for me, Ninja Gaiden Arcade was one that was very forgettable. And I just wanted to go back and play the home version because that one did so many amazing things. Not only was the action incredible, but it also has a story behind it. And it was one of the first action games that I remember that played more like a movie. And I was just playing this awesome ninja, Ryu Hayabusa. I think that's his name in the game. And I really wish that the Ninja Gaiden home version had these graphics. Maybe in the future we might get a retro version with these graphics. And obviously later on, Ninja Gaiden did come back for all the newer generation consoles. But at least for me, the original Ninja Gaiden on Nintendo Entertainment System, it's always going to have a special place in my heart. Regardless of how hard it was just well worth it. Whereas the arcade game, it wasn't worth me putting any more quarters in or dying so many times. And so that's Ninja Gaiden Arcade from Tecmo. Shoot 'em ups was a very popular genre of games back in the day, whether you're playing in the arcades or you're playing at home, and so it was really difficult for me to find a shooter that stood out. But Rayforce was one of them, because it did something a little bit different. Not only can you shoot at enemies in front of you, but you could also use this lock-on feature to lock onto enemies or objects in distance, and you could destroy them that way. And as they got closer, you could use your main weapon to wipe them out. So this was a fairly unique play mechanic at the time, and it was later adopted by many other shooters. And so Rayforce really introduced something that I think was fresh and new to the shooter genre, but at the same time it upped the level of difficulty. And if you're somebody who loves playing shoot 'em ups, you know how hard these games can be, but it's also satisfying when you could survive a barrage of bullets. Other things that Taito did with this game is they really focus on the presentation. The graphics are great, and the soundtrack is incredible. It has this really awesome techno beat It keeps you pumped. It keeps you pumping quarters into this game. And then other things I appreciated with Rayforce was the overall level of detail. If you actually look at the environments, there's so many details there, and there are lots of parallax scrolling, especially for an overhead game. So even though a lot of these shooters are in space and it kind of looks the same, this one does something different and it's really colorful, and I just love looking at each stage because they do something a little bit different with every level. And the overall enemy variety, it's pretty good. You know, you're always going to see like new enemies on every stage, and as I kept playing it further and further, I wanted to see what's going to happen next. And most of the times that doesn't happen with a lot of shooters that I play because, like I said, a lot of times they all look and play the same. And then when it came to the boss battles, I enjoyed the boss battles because it simply wasn't just recycling the same boss over and over. Every boss is a little bit different, and then when you see all the effects that it has, you know, these effects in the background, they really up the overall excitement level of the gameplay, and that just makes Rayforce just one of those shooters that you keep coming back to over and over. And so if you can find this game, you know, play it. There's many versions of this, but the original arcade is one that I still play to this day. Altered Beast is a game that I'll never forget because this was the game that came with my Sega Genesis. And so whenever I played this for the first time on the Genesis, my mind was blown because now I'm getting arcade level quality graphics at home. I couldn't believe it. Look at how awesome these graphics are. And so that's when I knew that Genesis does what Nintendo. Because ever since I was a kid, I've always loved arcade games, and I was always disappointed whenever I had to play the same game on my Nintendo Entertainment System or my Sega Master System, because I just did not expect the same level of graphics to be at home until I experienced the 16-bit power of the Sega Genesis. Now, whenever I did play this game on the arcades, I thought it was a fun game. It was short, sweet, and all these power-ups made me even more powerful, especially when I turned into this Altered Beast, this super werewolf. And when I experienced this for the first time, I felt like I was invincible. I could destroy any enemy out there, and then I faced this horrifying boss. And so in this case, I was like, all right, let's go ahead and take him out. You know, I'm this super beast, no problem. And with each level, you would turn into a different Altered Beast. The next level, you would turn into a dragon. After that, a bear. And then finally, a super werewolf. And so, yeah, Altered Beast was a good time. But I would say the reason why it's the most memorable for me is the fact that it gave me the first true taste of having an arcade experience at home without having to go to the arcades and wasting tons of quarters. And so those are all the games that I'm going to be going over today. I hope you did enjoy this trip to the arcades with me, and I hope it helped you just kind of get through everything that's going on around the world right now. And so if you actually had any thoughts on these games, be sure to leave that in the comments area below. And for all the geeks out there in the world, stay healthy and stay safe. And we'll see you on another episode. Hey geeks, if you are a creative geek like me and you wanted to learn how to create content on YouTube and other places on the internet, then check out my Go Content Creators Group, where you'll get access to additional videos and content for all the creative geeks out there. And the best part of it is, all of this is free. Simply head over to the link below, check out my page, and sign up for my Go Content Creators Group. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the other side.